So that's the other side of the story, that you are there, you bring together all these people and all the data, but life is complicated. Hi everyone, and welcome to the podcast of Socially Engaged Universities. This is a bit of a different episode because Sam and I, colleagues from the University of The Hague Applied Sciences, are reflecting on what we actually heard in all these 5 podcast episodes.
So I was wondering, Stephanie, which of the 5 projects was for you the most socially engaged university?
Ooh, that's of course a tough one, but I really liked Exeter personally because I thought, they deal with the question of climate change in this estuary, this river bedding. And I thought it was really strong that the university, with all its data and super informed scientists, tried to make the match with what the community is curious about their living environment. So, they also tried, for instance, to make this the water temperature that the university, of course, collects a lot of data on, to make that visible to the community of how that has been changing in the last years. So this match between the academic knowledge and what is actually interesting to the community, I thought it was an example of that engagement. So what I think makes the university really societally engaged is that you don't only stop at educating your students to be good scientists or good professionals, and that you not only do beautiful research, but you go the step further and you really communicate what you found. And even beyond that, you don't only communicate what you found. When you start researching, you research those things that are societally relevant. Not from what you learn from books or what still is a question that nobody else looked at, but what is really societally relevant in your local and regional society. And then, of course, we hope that they also have impact, for instance, on economic improvements, which we saw in Parma, or a societal better way of functioning, like in Ghent, that the park is really, it has problems. So before I get into all the different...
I think you're right. I think it's, for example, also in Magdeburg that they are looking into this underground scene, and that the university actually plays a role as a mediator. That they also say, for example, somebody from the local government can never go there without having to intervene. And in this case, the university can actually play a role and still collect the data. So I think that's very important for universities as well to have that independent role within these kind of projects.
Yes. So that already, but before we go into that about the lessons that we've learned, what was the example that really spoke to you? Was this Magdeburg Underground or something else?
It was really interesting to hear that actually due to COVID they could not complete their mission to see which people won't go to the theater and why. But they spoke to a lot of very interesting persons, and indeed, for example, the underground techno scene, where they would not have been without the university, because, of course, it's illegal. So, that spoke to me, because I really enjoy the parties. Sometimes they're legal, sometimes they're not. But it sounds really interesting to me.
I was thinking about this societally engaged, and when you are this probably is a continuum. But I think the core is about having meaningful research that doesn't end up in a drawer or hopefully.
I think it's very important that you give something back to your community. And if you don't give something back to your community, you could not be socially engaged. And I think in all these 5 projects, we actually see that these universities, they try to give something back to the community. For example, Parma as well. That they really try to educate the farmers to sell their products on the local market, which also was very interesting. That is not only the municipality, but also indeed it goes further, for example, with the farmers. I think that's very valuable to get socially engaged within your community.
Right. Yeah, looking at all these conversations, what do you think were the results that they really reaped, or the benefits, either from a university perspective or from the civil society?
Yeah, one of the main words that a lot of people say were relationships. It's very important to build relationships, and of course that takes time to build relationships. And but in the end, after you have those relationships, you can really start engaging in your community. So that for me was one of the main words of these all these 5 podcasts actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I was thinking about societally engaged is not only something that's interesting for the university, it also brings so much to the civil society organizations. I remember Mariana Cavalibori saying that they are a civil society organization, they have all these goals with the farmers, but they also have limited resources and they work with volunteers. And so when the university stepped in, it really brought the whole project to a new level, bringing in the research and the stability to really also fulfill these projects. So yeah, I think it's very beneficial as well for them.
Yeah, and I think it's also an excellent way for universities to give students an opportunity to get to know the community where they're studying. They can help with the research, they can interview, and they really get connected to the community from the university or where the university is located.
Yeah, and then of course we heard many of the professors saying they're so happy that they did actual research, not within the university itself, talking to their students or their parents, but to real people that they really had to present themselves. And
I as a student myself, I can really imagine that this kind of case studies are always a bit boring. Mr. This and this and this does this and this and this, instead of talking to a real person who has real problems. Because if you're studying something and you want to solve problems that are relatable to the study.
Yeah.
In this case, you could really help. For example, in Magdeburg, they said it was actually the first time they did it, and the students so much enjoyed it because it was real for the first time. And they really felt that they did something for the community.
Well, it's really motivating, I imagine. Yeah. And from the municipality, what I thought was interesting is that the city, in a few places, said it was really beneficial because it was a neutral role, a neutral partner stepping in that could ask all kinds of questions without having the idea that the university doesn't have an agenda. It might have, but in these cases, they didn't really have an agenda except for getting the empirical results there.
I think it also manages the distrust that's between, for example, the community and its municipality, and then there is this independent part of the university who can actually communicate with both and could share ideas with both, and that actually brings the community together with the municipality throughout the university.
It's also complicating, so they are a neutral party, but maybe some people also look at you like you bring the new solution because you are very informed. However, he also said it also complicates things sometimes. So that's the other side of the story, that you are there, you bring together all these people and all the data, but life is complicated. And so you cannot just, we brought in the university and then now we have the...
and also in Ghent, for example, Alexis, of course, next to it, he told us that the government structure in Belgium is always a bit complicated with all the different forms and different 3 parts. It also... in his research, he actually told us a very interesting thing.
There was, I think, a very good communication between partners. So we had a very nice feeling about ourselves, and we felt like we are making important progress. But then certainly during the 4th co-creation session, we introduced someone from academia, an expert in law, to give a presentation about confidentiality, and this was really a lot of information. Which you might think is helpful, but it also complicated things to a certain extent. And after that session, there was really a feeling amongst members like, phew, how are we going to proceed with all of this? So it felt like a setback. So then there was a new discussion about, but how are we going to continue with this, and what is really our common challenge? So I think at that moment, this was really a step backward instead of forward.
In Ghent, there was this thing that they brought all the parties together, which was something around how do we work together about the youth and the problems that they sometimes cause, be it from police or from welfare or from youth. They wanted to share the data with each other so much more, and they started to build up trust. So and understanding on how they all work in order to do so. And then they brought this lecturer to also highlight how that actually works. And then they found out actually law has been there in place to also protect privacy and to help, for instance, the Ministry of Justice to do a good study of what has actually happened in criminal offenses. And that actually made all the partners also feel a bit demotivated because, it's much more complicated than we think. And we can't just share information because we like it or it's important, because there's also law and regulation in place that actually prohibits that.
Yeah, so what Alexis said, that if it's already complicated for us, people that work for the city government or for the university, how complex would it be for the community to understand this problem? So I think that's a good example of that. You also face challenges if you do this kind of projects. What I also found very interesting about Alexis, that he said that sometimes you have to manage your expectations, so you cannot always achieve what you want, but you cannot also deliver what the other party wants. So I think also Delft.
That's a recurring theme. Huh?
Yeah, also Delft said it as well, that sometimes the university researches something, but the community actually asks something else, and it just you cannot always go into the right direction.
I really heard that in Magdeburg. That's true. That the city said, we went into this collaboration without really managing the expectations of all the cultural parties we got involved on. What is the scope? What is the vision behind this collaboration? And that led also to some unrest in the end, because maybe they didn't exactly receive, the cultural partners, what they had hoped for. So managing these expectations then, of course, is crucial for the collaboration, for people also to keep involved and not think, that's not giving me what I wanted. Yeah,
and so for example, in Delft, indeed, this community, they actually expected things from students. They told us, well, these students, they are not professionals yet. So what can we really expect from students if you bring in students to projects? And of course, as we said before, it's really good to actually give students the opportunity to work in the field. But of course, you always have to tell your community, well, we're working with students, so sometimes it might not be fully professional, because of course they're also still learning to become professionals.
I think one of the other points that were difficult sometimes are finance. So a lot of these pilot projects were even made possible because we had this Erasmus Plus fund. And you see that all the partners are really enthusiastic. A lot of them even have plans for the future. But they are all project financed. And if you want to have long-term impact, you cannot just go from one project finance to another project finance, of course.
Yeah.
So real change, needs a different structure, I think, also financially.
Yeah, and I think, after that we had spoke to all the partners, I really think it would be a shame if one of these projects need to shut down because of money issues, because it's actually, it goes further than research. It's really that engaging part, and, as myself also being a member of the community, I can really feel that sometimes, these questions are also in my community, and I think, well, if it would be research in other communities, then it would be super interesting to see what you find there. And maybe, for example, even doing the research of Delft somewhere else where there's also a knowledge broker, or maybe in the research of Magdeburg, see why do people in Exeter don't go to a theater. And I think it's, much broader than only
these.
So, Stephanie, I was wondering, we're talking about this independent, being independent as a university, but of course, we're also talking about being engaged. Can you, what's your thought about that? Being engaged and being independent is, quite the opposite.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that in a way, some of these projects are quite activist. Maybe all of them, like Parma, you want to keep people in the mountains. It has a certain goal and a vision. But also Exeter, there's climate change, and we need to engage the community and make them aware of what's going on, and maybe even how we can combat or slow down climate change. So you have a bit of a double position if you engage as a university, because maybe you also step away from your independent research position and you lean a bit towards more a vision for society that you would like to embrace and bring forward. So it's even, I think, a challenge for researchers that you balance these two things in yourself. You want to do good research that is independent and it's objective, but you also engage with real people and real challenges. And of course, as a person, you also feel something and want something with this topic.
Yeah. So for lessons that we draw in this podcast, we can actually say that it's very important to to build up the good relationships. That's one of the first things I would say. And of course, some of the projects such as Delft and Ghent. Some of the projects such as Delft, they already knew the community because of the knowledge broker used to live in this neighborhood.
Yeah. And Exeter,
as well. Yeah, they also already knew the people living around the estuary. But I think it's very important to build up those relationships. And if you look at, for example, Ghent, that built it up pretty quickly with the local government as well. That's very important to take the time to build those relationships. That's essential for the outcome of your research and being socially engaged to your community.
Yeah, I think because you get a better grasp of what's really going on in the community. So the relationship itself gives you entrance into what's going on, what are the different interests and needs.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I remember from Magdeburg to say. It opened doors for you, because it takes time to build up trust. And if you have gained this trust, you probably would have gained it for longer than only one research.
Yeah. And the other thing is the managing of expectations, so what you can and cannot deliver as a university or with students. I think that's an important lesson if you want to get started with this kind of collaboration.
Yeah, so indeed tell your community that if you work with students that they will not always deliver the most professional product, but at least they are really working for example, in Delft, they're really working for the neighborhood, and they actually, they do their best, and they try to actually give something back to the community where they're studying.
Yeah. I thought that was nice because I thought it would be in Delft a big issue, like, you have to, they're second years or third years. But then Paul was super enthusiastic. He said it was even nicer to have them around and walking in his house than some consultant that is a bit more detached and formal. Maybe it's like his grandkids coming and doing a research in his house, a bit like this. I
also can imagine that because of this, it's not that professional yet. Those students, they are still really learning, so they also know, we can do very professional to this person, but then we also have to deliver this very professional report. For them, it's really nice to work in the field instead of being behind your desk all day. So I think that makes them really happy that they can actually do something for people instead of do something for people that are not actually exist.
For the teacher. Okay.
And I think it's also very important to develop a common language that you can understand everybody in your community from...
I think Philip from Magdeburg said that he didn't expect to have problems communicating well with the cultural sector because maybe unconsciously he was also thinking, I'm a bit of a cultural sector myself because I do research. I'm not a business person. But still he experienced this, I use different words, I have a certain terminology, and the other people have expectations of me that I cannot fulfill immediately. So they were also thinking about, what is our language that we can share? I mean, language is a difficult thing. We are talking in English right now. We never find really a common language that connects everybody, but working to understand better what terms we use is at least something as a start. Yeah. Did I ask you, which one were you finding most inspiring in the end?
Ooh, that's a very hard question. Well, from my perspective, I think I enjoyed Ghent the most because I think it's very, very interesting to see the relationships being built between the municipality and the workers in the park, and that indeed in this case they told us that the Keizerspark is actually there's a bit of a drugs problem in this park, and there's also been problems between the social workers and the city government or even the
Justice Department.
Justice Department, and I think this getting this out in the open, telling to each other, because Dieter told us that sometimes these kids just disappear out of the blue, and then a couple of weeks or months later they came back and they say, we have been in jail for a month, or and that they didn't even know that these kids were away.
Yeah, the welfare organization.
So I think it's very, very, very interesting that they try to open up between social workers, Justice Department, and the city government. And Actually, that was the one that for me was the most. It gave me a lot of thoughts on how can maybe other cities also do this and be more open about it, because it makes it much more easier for social workers indeed to do their job correctly.
Yeah. You also really saw the structural problems of how we have different systems, and then that the youth worker, for instance, has been working with this person for a year, and they're working towards something or getting into schooling, and then he gets picked up by the police and disappears, and the Justice Department gives him a sentence, some maatregel, as we say in Dutch, that completely disrupts the whole development process that the youth worker has been really working hard for. And I must admit that must be so demotivating. So I think that's really engaging in societal issues here and now that are not easy to fix. And still, also the Ghent University and all these partners got together and they wanted to, put it a step forward. I think that's really...
Yeah, and I think that other cities can learn a lot from this approach, because I don't think this is only a problem in Ghent. I think this will be a problem in a lot of cities around the world.
Let's hope they find a fix, because that was still not in near sight, because it's such a complex question. Yeah.
So and Stephanie, from our perspective, you spoke some really good Italian in the Parma podcast.
My special trick, yeah.
So, can you maybe say, why do you speak Italian?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's pure love, not only pure love for the language or for the country, but my husband is Italian, coming from Tuscany. So actually, I've been to the Parmese Mountains, and they're really pretty to walk in. Yeah.
So they're a place that I must see in my life.
Yes. Yeah. So every day when I come home, we talk Italian as well with my little boy. So that's really fun. Yeah.
I had a lot of fun making this podcast. And did you also enjoy it, Stephanie?
Yeah, a lot. Yes.
And why?
Well, I think it got a bit addictive at some point, because we have been listening. I know I've been knowing these partners for some time, but really hearing their stories and what are the issues playing in these local communities and how the university steps in and helps solve or try to solve, and then also finds all these challenges. I thought it was really, very fascinating and inspiring as well.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, and of course, this whole project was done online due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we really hope that we can see our partners in Parma in October 2021.
Yeah, and enjoy those mountains. Visit them, yeah.
And the wine.
Exactly.
And of course, to have a nice conclusion of this project.
Yes, looking forward.
So, dear listener, thank you very much for listening. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends or your colleagues. Have a good one.